Okay, guys, and welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a little bit of an unexpected comparison today, brought to you by channel sponsors Montro Straps. You guys know I like to be very transparent when it comes to any types of paid sponsorships. It's not a paid review for their products. It is just, of course, a nice shout out to them, and they're enabling me to do a segment that I probably normally wouldn't do because I'm taking the time to kind of create and contrast other things that I've already reviewed. Now, today's kind of topic is going to be comparing my Seiko SLA039 or SBEX011 if you are looking at the JDM model versus the international nomenclature, and my first gen 1521 classic COSC certified Squale and or Squala or Squale, depending on how much you want to look into that. I'll be calling it a Squale for all intents and purposes. Now, in terms of kind of comparing them, I just thought that this would be a fun comparison just because they are very similar in terms of their just overall silhouette and aesthetic, and even a bit of their heritage past in terms of kind of what they represent as a real cornerstone milestone for their respective brands, but also that they are all completely different in a lot of ways, especially in terms of their intended market. I mean, one is the most expensive mechanical Seiko diver you can buy today, and the other is, well, I guess maybe it's the most expensive Squale diver. It might be, might not be at this point, but they definitely are marketed in very different spaces but have a very similar aesthetic, so why not get them side by side? So with all that said, let's go ahead, zoom the camera out, get these pieces in hand, and take a closer look. All right, guys, before we dive in, another huge thank you to Montro Straps. These are very, very nice. They do come in nicely packaged as well. You can see the signature red, very clean, and here's a close look at what I think would be a great pairing in terms of what we have today is, of course, for dive watches, signature orange, very nicely done. You can see it nice and clean. The big difference about these straps, guys, what sets them aside is that they are really masterfully thin. So they do taper, so you're going to have a bit of extra support up here as you come and follow that angle, though it gets very, very thin, and that's really what sets them apart. It's going to be that ultimate comfort. Of course, it's going to come at a slight premium. These are about $45 shipped within the US, which is actually, I think, a pretty strong deal considering how many really expensive rubber straps that I've purchased over the years. I think these really do stand out, and I wouldn't be at all surprised if over the years this brand really gained some ground and started probably raising their prices over time as they start offering more and more options. So again, huge shout out to Montro for sponsoring this particular segment. But hey, let's take a look at these two divers. Now, these are two divers that I wear pretty regularly, I would say, with the slight edge going to the Seiko SLA039, just because in terms of the colorway combination, there's a lot less that this watch has to compete with. And just the mission statement of this piece, I mean, this is a grail piece, straight up. I mean, it doesn't matter how expensive of watches that you collect, this is not going to be the beater in anyone's collection. It's ever brilliant steel, high beat movement. It's a recreation of the world's first high beat diver, and which was made by Seiko, and they reissued it. And this is not the direct reissue. That is more of a one-to-one in terms of the colorways being the black and gilt. This is a special 55th anniversary 1100 piece limited edition. It was inspired, of course, by that original 6159 diver from way back when. And it is a just premium recreation of Seiko's first quote-unquote professional 300-meter saturation diver that also happened to be the world's first high-beat diver. And it is really a truly spectacular piece that I probably don't gush about as much as I should, just because it's, at the end of the day, it's a Seiko, right? It's not really meant to be this kind of hot horology type of piece. I own Grand Seikos, I own King Seikos and Prasad, all the other stuff, all the other fancies. And I even have a really nice SLA017 62 MAS recreation that I love very, very much. But this one really serves as a bit of a signature piece within my collection because of, it just represents something very special. And man, is it handsome. I will say that when I wear this piece to, various watch club gatherings locally within San Diego County, it does garner a lot of compliments and a lot of questions and inquiries in terms of what it is, what it's made of, where can they find it. And the reason why you don't hear about these too much is because they are so expensive, guys. I was fortunate enough to find this at a crazy low deal, MSRP of 6,800 and well underneath half of that, barely worn. So very, very nice. You guys can see monoblock case here. Some will say monocoque case, whatever. It's a one piece case there, monoblock. Of course, everything is front loaded behind the bezel there. So really, really beautiful, guys. The Seiko 8L55 movement, 55-hour power reserve, beating at 5 hertz or 36,000 vibrations per hour. And these are not regulated within super tight tolerances, though. This is going to be plus 15 to minus 10 seconds per day in terms of the guaranteed accuracy in terms of its spec, but it's keeping well within that. And that's typically the story for Seiko's more high-end movements. The movement that's in here is a Grand Seiko base movement. It's made in the Grand Seiko studio, polished, of course, Zaratsu hand finishing, all the niceties and goodies you can think of, guys. It's all happening here. So this thing is, again, top tier. But on kind of another spectrum of top tier comes this beautiful little Squale, guys. So the 50 Atmos line, or also known as the 1521, this is the classic. So it's going to have a really, really standardized colorway, standardized layout. This is from the first gen batch. They did do a future batch that had a brushed case. It was actually brushed and polished, which was a first for the line, which I was thrilled about. Unfortunately, the one thing that I noticed that I didn't like so much was that in that inner rehaut, which here is highly polished, they did it matte blasted, which I just feel like just misstep. So I was actually totally fine on missing out on the brushed case. Hopefully within a future line, they'll release it with a brushed and polished case and that high polished rehaut, because I think that is probably one of the biggest selling points for this timepiece. Now, this currently has an MSRP of about $1,600. So again, two totally different ballparks. It is limited in terms of that they make these in small batches and small runs, but it's not limited in terms of that they're just going to be done making them after X amount of pieces, versus the Seiko, which is 1,100 pieces and it's done forever. Here, they're going to keep making them as long as people are buying them, and they might even update and iterate, as I just mentioned, as they continue to release. And if you guys want full specs, full reviews, they exist on the channel. Definitely check those out. But I'm just going to talk about some of the things that jump out that I love about this timepiece. You're finally getting those applied indices, and it's beautiful. You're getting revised text. You're getting revised dial branding, only signed once, and the other words are meaningful, right? 50 Atmos, which has been an actual nickname for the brand for a long time. People see these as the 50 Atmos diver. They can be even marketed as the 50 Atmos versus being marketed as the 1521. You're seeing, of course, chronometer officially certified. So although this is just an off-the-shelf Sellita SW200 movement, it is an elaborate grade that has been tuned to COSC tolerances, which means that it does have an accuracy that is guaranteed of -4 to +6 seconds a day, which it's been keeping well within that as well. But this has a 4 hertz beat, which is going to be 28,800 vibrations per hour. Some people will call that a high beat. I call that just a normal beat rate. Things below that at 3 hertz are going to be low beat, and then I consider, of course, 5 hertz being high beat in terms of that smoother sweep. This has a 38-hour power reserve, which is slightly short, to be honest, for a modern diver. But the nice thing is this watch isn't too heavy in terms of trying to be modern. This is definitely a very, very retro timepiece, and it embraces that all the way. It also, of course, you're seeing 4 o'clock crown, very iconic. You're seeing fully graduated timing bezel there, which is beautiful. Applied indices, date at 3 o'clock. Of course, one that is framed, to an extra extent, and then the other that is more just framed within. I think actually I like it framed like this with the painting on the frame because it does tie into the painted hash marks that go all the way around. Everything is very nice. And it's just really handsome. This is actually fully polished. So I would love to have had one that had the brushed and polished case. But again, the trade-off being that high polish rehot, which I think is, again, just a huge selling point for the watch because of the distortion it adds. Because this is just a flat sapphire crystal, guys, but thanks to that rehot, you actually do get a lot of amazing visual play here, which I can absolutely appreciate. And this thing is just so cleanly executed. It's just a fantastic looking watch. It has a 41 millimeter diameter, but it's only 41.6 millimeters across the bezel. It's very thin at 12.7 millimeters. I know it might not look really thin. That's because the lug to lug is only 48.4 millimeters. And this is 316L surgical grade stainless steel, so it's not ever brilliant steel comparable to the Seiko, but man, this thing is really, really nice. And it's actually quite thin considering it's a 500 meter water resistance diver, so that is very, very nice. And you know what, since this isn't a full on review, I don't have to cut away to put it on the wrist. I'm just going to put it on the wrist right now, and this piece just sings on the wrist, I have to say, guys. There are a lot of watches that are much thicker than this that don't offer the same amount of water resistance, and that's something that is, I think, really stood the test of times in terms of Squale and their brand, really being famous for creating components for other famous and iconic dive watch brands, and because they were making those cases, eventually, hey, why not, let's get the brand going and just start marketing our own watches with off-the-shelf movements and offering really great prices. And this is just a wonderful example of a very handsome watch, again, that I think fits into really any type of collection here, whether you're a big dive watch fan or not, or you like Swiss watches, or you just want to try a Swiss watch. I mean, a Swiss chronometer with heritage in terms of its design aesthetic, in terms of being tied to, the heyday of dive watches. I think that is really, really admirable. But of course, this piece here definitely meant to be more of a crowning jewel for a very, very specific collector, right? Within a very specific collection. No one's going to buy this watch by accident, guys. This is very cost prohibitive, and honestly, not everyone is going to appreciate the level of in-house mastery that is happening here in terms of the level of finish on the handset, on the case, just the material of ever brilliant steel. Some people don't really care about how bright or corrosion resistant your materials are. Some people won't care about the level of smoothness to that high beat movement, which is, I mean, even across not just Seiko, but all watch manufacturers today, high beat mechanical movements are not super common, and they are definitely not cheap. So to have something with that 5 hertz beat rate that ties back to something within horological significance down to, hey, the first high beat dive watch, I mean, that is just something that is very, very special. And of course, this bluish gray colorway in terms of the dial is fantastic. And I'm just blown away and captivated by this watch. And you can see, of course, you're going to get the modern niceties, sapphire with that beautiful dual curve outlook, which is going to give you very nice readability and legibility, but also a bit of play at harsh angle. This doesn't have the perfect proportions that the original had. It's slightly thicker, and that's just something that you just kind of have to live with. The thickness on here, although it might appear even thicker than this, it's actually 15.3. So The crazy thing is I have thicker watches than this. And, you know, one of the things, of course, that makes it look thicker is the fact that it is a monoblock case. So it's flat, you know, you don't get to break up that visual line by having a thinner mid case and then having a case back to screw into it. So it does, you know, it in terms of the visual kind of profile on you know, at least in the air, it's going to appear larger. But I will say on the wrist, which is, I don't normally wear watches on this wrist because I do write with my left hand. But for just kind of comparison's sake here, let's go ahead and get this on and check it out. So bam, check that out. What a looker, my goodness. We'll go ahead and tighten up the frame here so you guys can get a more detailed look, while of course not throwing off any types of distortion. Let me just try to get some of the let me just wipe this bad boy off and try to get some of these little pieces, specks of dust off of here. But you do get some nice brushing, of course, that does come through quite nice on the top of the lugs, but the majority of it is polished. But as you can see, when it's on the wrist, a lot of that melts away because it is reflecting and undercutting on the wrist. So it's actually a lot tidier than you might initially think. And man, is it gorgeous. But check this out right here, guys. For much less, I mean, come on, look what you're able to have. And specs wise, this holds up. No, it's not a high beat. It's not in-house, but it is COSC certified, which does hold a very nice standard within Swiss watchmaking. And it looks great. And it's not some, you know, tuned down, detuned movement, which, you know, we're seeing a lot more these days where you're getting slower beat rates for extended power reserves. Here, the trade-off is you're going to have a shorter power reserve, but that nice standard sweep, which does look quite fantastic. And you're getting a nice, in terms of the watch itself, another nicety is that insert there is fully loomed, guys. So beautifully done and nicely executed there. You know what? While we're here, let's do a little bit of this. Very loud, but a little soft, but quite audible. Very smooth though, super smooth and silky. Okay, why don't we do the same now for the Seiko? Much more dampened. It has that Seiko feel to it. Where it's very smooth and then the clicks kind of just pop and unpop there as you go. But you know what, guys? This wouldn't be a nice dive watch comparison if we didn't get them off the wrist and do a little bit of, you know, let's say some lume shots and low light transition to kind of close this piece out. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights here. Hey, as you can see, guys, this is a good lesson in terms of kind of sometimes it's really based on the application, not necessarily the compound. You're going to see, of course, Seiko's Lume Bright beating away, but also Superluminova C3, which is a great compound. A little bit less surface area in terms of the dial markings, but I'd say pretty equal in terms of the hand application. And then, of course, you're going to have a shielded lume pip versus an exposed, fully loomed bezel insert. So in terms of, you know, your use case, that could be a huge selling point for you in terms of legibility. But you're going to see that, you know, comparatively, I'd say there's a little bit of fading that's already happening with the Squale versus the Seiko, which is to be expected. And again, this is nothing for, you know, Squale to be upset about, or if you're an owner of this watch, for you to be upset about and pout about, because it's just against some of the best lume that's on the market, and it's applied at a very, very high level in terms of its, you know, being deep filled within a beautifully tall indice that is also wide and very legible. So while we just let that fade for a little bit longer, I like to, of course, work in a bit of a low light transition because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to find yourself coming in and out of buildings, walking underneath overhangs, or just hanging out underneath the shade of a tree. So it is nice to see what these colors, textures, and finishes render like in less than optimal lighting. So maybe include a bit of harsh lighting, guys, which typically could expose any types of production defects. What you're going to see here is just, of course, a little bit of wear and tear from these pieces being worn quite frequently, and they're very, very nice. Of course, I would say that, yeah, ultimately that Squale does have to compete with a lot of other matte black skin diver style, retro diver style watches that I own, whereas the Seiko being kind of the king of blue dial options there, it definitely has a little bit more of a use case that is going to dictate a little bit more wear. I mean, this thing is gorgeous. You guys check out those sweeping second hands, just beaten away beautifully there. So very smooth, although of course you have one more of a standard 4 hertz beat rate, and then another with that high 5 hertz beat rate, which is less common and, but also probably less appreciated. There's probably tons of folks who will never own a high beat mechanical watch, and they're totally content with that. But let's go ahead, hit the lights back on, and get into closing thoughts, guys. So another shout out to Montro Straps for sponsoring this content, guys. Again, that keeps the channel going. So these type of segments are always, I'm always happy to oblige when a brand reaches out and says, hey, they want to, do an integration or a campaign. So big shout out to them. I'll have some links to their store down in the description. But for me, guys, I love both of these watches, and while they both capture a very similar aesthetic, in terms of their, their heft, in terms of their 4 o'clock crowns, traditional dial layouts and whatnot, very minimalist, but also with maximized detailing. They're propositioned at very different audiences, made very clear by the price points and the level of availability of these two watches. I mean, the Seiko definitely is meant to be a very specific crown jewel within a very hardcore collection, while the Squale makes a really wonderful case for any collection across a wide spectrum. I mean, you could own a lot of watches, and you could buy this Squale. You could own, let's say, a lot of luxury pieces, and the Squale would still be a great everyday wear type of piece. Or you could own a lot of more affordable pieces, and the Squale could be a great kind of crowning jewel as having to have heritage, especially within the dive watch community, while still having a very high grade of spec and a really nice fit and finish, well put together, and just really, really handsome overall. So there's definitely a lot to like with both models. Again, I don't think they're really going to be cross-shopped against each other just due to the massive price difference. But as somebody who owns both and wears both and enjoys both, again, I would say that they're definitely propositioned at very different audiences. Some people will look at this video and say there's only one watch that I see that I like on this video. Some people will say there's only one watch I can afford in this video, and some people will absolutely dislike both watches and not made it this far in the video because this just isn't their style. Maybe they're looking for something more modern or contemporary. So yeah, not everything is made for everyone, and even as an enthusiast, and how you might believe that every watch should be targeted at you, they're not all targeted at you. So as much as some people would probably like to peel away some of the layers and make these watches cheaper and more affordable, there's plenty of people who would be willing to pay a slightly more if they were able to refine or add on certain aspects. So that's just the name of the game, guys. And really, for me, in terms of value for money, the way you can get the most bang per buck is for you to enjoy your timepieces and value what they offer you, and be less concerned about another watch that you don't want and all the specs that it has, and why can't you have those things in the watch that you own or the watch that you want. Ultimately, it's kind of like art. Sure, you can go out and have somebody paint you a Mona Lisa for $5. Somebody can paint you one that is an amazing reproduction, and then and but I don't think they're going to go out on the forums or on Facebook and say, well, am I just paying for the Da Vinci name? Right? Like, that's just not how it works, right? One is somebody that is, either you're into art or you're trying to look like you are. So either you enjoy timepieces in your collector or you just want to look like you do. And if you just want to look like you do, then of course there are even cheaper options than both of these that are out there, that you can have the tallest spec sheet at the lowest price point with the least amount of creativity, ingenuity, or passion for this. And there's definitely brands that are out there just to turn a profit. So they'll continue to be purchased. But for those of you that can, empathize and be quite enthusiastic about watches and wristwatches and, horological significance and everything that goes along with these, legendary brands, you definitely have a lot of options for you to enjoy. So with that said, let me know what you all think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do a like. And if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.